welcome to CVA. This is a panel about multiculturalism in conjunction with our current exhibition, our current community show. And so we've gathered you all here today to talk about multiculturalism and representation in the arts in Greensboro and just diversity and what that means to all of us. And we have our panelists here. So before we get started, I'm going to take a moment to let them introduce themselves. So do you want to start, Marissa?
Start. So I am Marissa Monroe. I am a graphic artist here in Greensboro. I focus primarily on brand and web design, and I'm really happy to be here. I don't know what else you want me to share.
Good, that's a good start. Do you want to?
Me? Oh. I'm Claudia Femenias, and I'm the president of the board of directors of Casa Azul of Greensboro. Our office is right there on the third floor, and it's an organization that promotes Latin American art and culture and Latino artists in the community. I'm also a professor of Latin American culture at High Point University, and so I kind of combine those two things. I am not an artist.
But you're around art all the
But
time.
I do work with art and culture in the community.
She's an artist. She doesn't yet know what her medium is. That's what we've decided. I'm Lia Miller with Creative Aging Network of North Carolina. Our focus is on older adults throughout the state of North Carolina and bringing opportunities for older people to engage in the arts wherever they live and gather, and regardless of ability level. So there's no prior experience required. We do visual arts, literary arts, and performing arts. And we also work with refugee elders as well.
Okay.
I'm Ashton. I am a mom first, and I'm also an orthodontist clinician. So I help with braces on teeth. It's my first show. And I also do pyrography art, so wood burning art, and I feel very intimidated by this other amazing women. But that's pretty much me, a little something.
Okay, well, thank you guys. And we're excited for this and trying to figure out a way to get started on this huge, exciting topic that we have here today. So I guess maybe start off by talking about each of your perspectives. You know, we kind of selected you so that you could, like, this is like a platform for perspectives that are underrepresented so that we can talk about, you know, what that means, multiculturalism and diversity in this community. And so maybe it would be helpful if you guys want to go and talk about like your individual perspectives and what multiculturalism, how that applies to you or your organization. Is that a good place to start? Just or yourself, yeah. Or should I have something more pointed? Is that like?
I'll start.
Oh, yeah.
You go ahead. No, go ahead. And I'm next.
Okay. So I really come from the idea of inclusion and diversity and how to define diversity. And the way we define it is not just racially, and I think often it's only defined by race, but knowing that the older population is booming around the world, and particularly in North Carolina, our older population is going to double, and there are going to be more people over the age of 60 than under the age of 17 within the next 7 or 8 years here in North Carolina. It's really important for us to raise awareness of that fact and also recognize that it's an extremely underserved population and all of the different ethnicities and races of older adults. Less than 2% of philanthropy dollars go to programs for older adults, and yet it's the fastest growing population of people in our state and in our country. So for me, it's really important to get that message out and to say for those folks who are interested in the arts that whether people have engaged in the arts their whole lives or they've never had the chance, we ought to be able to provide those opportunities for older people, not just for the younger people. I don't think we need to take anything away from the younger people, but we do need to make more available for the older population.
I like the word inclusion because when we talk about multiculturalism and diversity, it's all about giving an opportunity to everybody at the same level. And I think that Greensboro, our mission and vision, etc., at Casa Azul is to promote the Latino culture in our community through artists and cultural events. So it's not just artists per se, but in general to bring it to the community. And a little bit to talk about other aspects of Latino culture. I mean, I always say when we talk about Latinos, is the problem that needs to be solved. And what we want to do is to be part of the conversation and show other parts. We're not just a problem. We are also a group of people with culture and with other things to share with the community. So inclusion is very important, and we work with everybody. And so CVA, we work with you guys. We are now building something with the Cooper Lawn. So we try to build bridges that way. So it's not just this little group of Latino cultural artists, but how can we educate and how we can make the community more engaging. Now, I think that Greensboro has come a long way, very long way in how multicultural and diverse we are and how many activities and events for everybody are in the city. Now, do we all have the same resources? Are we all considered at the same level, which is another way of seeing multiculturalism? That's another issue. And I think that we have a long way to go. What is considered art? Who are the artists that are promoted? What are the organizations that are supported? I think that Greensboro is not doing a very good job in that area.
And can I just say one more thing before? I really appreciate the point that it's not a problem that needs to be fixed, and it's the same for older adults. Our older people are a resource for our community, and I think too often they're viewed as a problem and viewed from a medical standpoint versus from a human standpoint.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, what both of you are saying, but you kind of, for me, I think, brought a viewpoint that I don't necessarily think about, that there is an older population, or maybe that's not represented well. So I like that because everything that I do, I really try hard to make it a diverse and inclusive experience. And I think that's because my own personal experiences, I am a Black woman, I am dating a woman on top of that. So there's a lot of things that sometimes can be stacked against me. So I try really hard in other areas, whether it's age, race, orientation, to create something where people feel welcome, whatever their differences are. So hopefully that's a good.
Okay, hi. So coming from where I'm from, it's a very small town, and I didn't start to get into art until probably junior or senior, and I didn't take it from there. I didn't really get into it. I've been here for about probably 9 or 10 years. So as soon as I graduated, I came to Greensboro. So I couldn't probably touch base on how it's growing or not from Greensboro, because I never stayed in touch with it, and even when I did pick it up, I never stayed, or I never came towards the art, I guess scene here. I will say that when I did come, my cousin, he is one of the directors for the Guilford Natives and also the Guilford Natives Cultural, that's actually beside here. So
Ashton's Native American. I don't think that we mentioned.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No,
yes,
no.
I am Native American.
I don't know if it's in your bio.
So that kind of helped boost my interest in trying to, I guess, get into it. But the thing about, I guess, multiculturalism and how, like in the classroom, I guess, it seemed very like superficial and like when I was growing up. So what I'm trying to say is they're trying to teach you several things about different cultures, and but they're not like touching on like the meaning and like who these people are. They're like, today this is what we're going to learn about, and we're not really learning anything about it. They're like, okay, this is a mask, and then we're going to make little African masks, and then we're going to go to Native Americans like the next week. We're all going to make dream catchers, and they're not saying why are you making it, like the history about it, who actually uses these, because not all tribes do.
Yeah, like they're ignoring the diversity within that population.
Yeah. And they're kind of
like
like putting it into this one little thing. They're like, Native Americans love dream catchers. And not all of them do. I mean, I do, but not all tribes do. Coming from like small town, coming here, and I've only been doing, I guess, serious art for about a year almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty new to like being open about it and like learning more about it. It's been really helpful being around a lot of people like Devin.
Proud owner of one of her pieces. My mother saw your piece today from like across the house and zoomed in on it. It was like, what is that new piece of art? I was like, well, if you come to the panel discussion this evening.
which she didn't.
So it's very new to me, especially like being here. I'm very nervous.
I'm gonna
end it here.
Yeah, bye.
I think that what you said brings a very, very important part when we talk about multiculturalism, talking about cultures, I mean minority cultures, I mean Native Americans, and I would say for Latino arts. Because for us, is, okay, so here we go again with the Latino for Hispanic Heritage Month. Our phone doesn't stop ringing. Can you bring somebody to dance the Mexican dance or whatever they do?
Or let's make Day of the Dead mask or something.
And we have a Day of the Dead exhibit, and we are very peculiar with it because we really
you want to respect it.
And so we have an educational component, and we do several things, and we actually, that's how we started our collaboration, talking with Café Mortal. This year we're bringing it here. And people said, let's do this. I said, no. And I had to learn about it. I'm not Mexican, so I had to learn. And they were very much, this cannot be here. So it's a double-edged sword because you want to promote it, but at the same time, is that the only time when they're going to know about Latino art and culture? September, October, and November. And then we go down in invisibility. And 1 year we did it with the Native American. We always bring a different culture, a different group. And I remember we talked to them, we told them about what were the aspects, and then they built the ofrenda at the exhibit. And we were impressed on how many common things we had on how we approach that. But what you're saying is, look, let's do this little mask, let's do this little maraca. And that's something that in Casa Azul we're dealing with now. Okay, do we want to keep doing things when they call us to do this little activity, or do we want to get serious about art and culture? You know.
But I also think it's like important, like if they ask to do something like that, just like I guess maybe step in and be like, yes, we can do that, but also I would very much like for you to let your students learn more about this, that, and whatever you want to teach besides like salsa dancing or something like that.
And that's what we've been doing. We don't do anything like that without really having the educational component that we call it, and being a professor, that's kind of my part too in there. But I think that in part it is, and I think, and here comes the one that I'm not from the United States, even though I have lived here for over 30 years. But I have a different culture, and the Southerners, it's a different culture, and it comes, I was talking to my students today in my Latin American class. I said, what are some things that you don't know anything? And they said politics and religion about Latin America. And I said, well, this is the problem. In here, those are the topics that you avoid. While in Latin America, we breathe and live politics and discussion and argument. And I think that all of us, when we talk about multiculturalism in Greensboro, in this community, we try to do it in a very nice way. We build bridges, and we cooperate, but we never problematize. And there's nothing wrong with problematizing.
I think that's a good.
There's nothing wrong with saying, why are you just calling me in September and October, but I'm not good enough for February and March?
You don't want to step on anybody's toes.
But my experience is last year said this is going to end, and so I start talking to everybody. Well, now we cannot really, we don't have the manpower.
Keep up with it. You
Keep
don't
up
have the
with
human
what
resources.
wishful thinking, but it's true. And I think that needs to be a more serious conversation about what are the issues that are really affecting multiculturalism. Not everything is wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
But we're doing great work here, but it needs to be who's being
Not
ignored.
siloed. It feels like in Greensboro and probably lots of other places, there's so many silos. It's really challenging to collaborate, even though funders want us to collaborate, just trying to, I guess, come up with those ideas where there is enough human resources, there is enough financial, resources for us to be able to move topics and culture and issues and resources forward that we're all trying to work on in the arts and still do everything else that we have to do.
Just quickly, I just had a conversation with someone that was talking about Berlin, and we were talking about like the arts in Berlin in Germany and how kind of like dark it feels if you've ever been there, like seeing the work that comes out of Germany in general. And this friend was saying, well, they're not afraid to confront like the violence and the bad things that have occurred in that country, which are huge things. And every museum, there's like Holocaust museums and Checkpoint Charlie museums and monuments that talk about the horrors that occurred, and how here it's very, very different. Like we don't want to talk about any of that. We would rather talk about the heroes that come out of it, or I'm not really sure what. Maybe even like, they wash the history in order to make it look nicer than what it was. And we're seeing like the effects of that now with monuments being ripped down. But that just like popped in my head when you were talking about not wanting to confront the issues.
Yeah.
And that goes into funding too. Because if you're going to put an art exhibit that is problematic, you're not going to get the funding. So you have to play nice.
And so, but like, why is that? Who in Germany is like, yes, let's like confront these things, because they have the knowledge that that's how you make change. Like, look, this happened, don't do it again.
Yeah, and it's also how you become like an emotionally healthy nation. Is by confronting like your past and also your citizens that are part of that past too. And like, so I think, and especially in the South, I'm sorry, I don't mean to like talk too much, but also like, as part of the South, I see that problem a lot too.
That's something that we try to address when I'm working with our artists. One of the things when they go through training, one of the things that we talk about is if you're leading, facilitating an art class and someone gets upset, which can happen, particularly if we're working with somebody with dementia, or we're working in skilled care where people have experienced lots of losses and they don't have their independence anymore. If someone starts crying, how do you deal with it? It's not, oh, stop crying, it's going to be okay. It's talk to me. tell me, can you express it through color? Can you, whatever we're working on, using that art as a way to express those emotions, because in the South, how are you doing? Fine.
Yeah.
When that's not exactly how you're doing, so.
Can I ask you a question? Hearing the word inclusion, which is a beautiful word, when we do all bring different experiences and things to the table, what is acting on inclusion to each of you? How do you make that a verb? How can we do better about that?
How can the audience be more inclusive?
Anybody. I think anybody. I feel like when we all come with different experiences, what's that level ground where we start?
Oh.
And how do we then react in an inclusive way? Like, what are the most important things that you can think of?
I think being open to the idea of learning about other people. I think a lot of us want to learn, but maybe sometimes we don't know how to do it. So just coming to the table and literally being open to different points of view, or maybe hearing things that you don't really want to hear. Because while sometimes that can be kind of annoying, it kind of opens your eyes to other viewpoints and perspectives, and to me, I feel like it's just great character building. But I think just really showing up and wanting to genuinely learn about other people, their experiences, their cultures, their struggles, their wins, all of that.
And I think that you come at it perhaps trying to find connections where there are commonalities and perhaps building on those. But there are certain characteristics that we all share no matter what the culture is, what the ethnicity is. So if you can begin a difficult conversation maybe with where are the commonalities, and then begin to explore those more difficult topics. But you have to build trust
That's
too, in order to get to some of the more difficult.
And I think that is by the listening and having really going to a conversation and listening to what others have to say. And sometimes what you hear is not what you want to say. And sometimes even, to be honest with you, in Casa Sul, even on the board, we have people from different countries. And with complete different cultures and ideas. And we have learned from each other and listened, and sometimes we criticize something, but we don't get, and our voice goes up and then it goes down, and we are still best friends, but at the same time we can really do that communication, and I think that is key on the inclusivity and the commonalities. I remember watching a commercial, and we are right now in a very divisive situation, and the commercial was more about, so stand up, it was a room full of people. Stand up, those of you that have a parent that has died recently. And then those of you that are grandparents taking of your children. Those of you that are single mothers. Those of you that, so it was more on the human aspect that every single culture has. And one thing that as a Latino, it bothers me when they talk about, Latin Americans and their families. And I say, and what about your family values? They're the same.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same. We care for our parents, we care for our kids, we care for the family. So it's not special, it's just different ways of doing it. So I think that the commonalities in the human aspect is very important.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, you
I agree with that. Talking about the families and extended family and kind of caring for the older and my great grandmother, she just passed away and she was early 90s, and my my grandma included, her 9 children combined were just trying to keep her in the house and let her stay there and not put her somewhere and just try to care for her, spend the night, but I think it's a big thing that people trying to find a commonality that collaborate. Like when artists come together, just like, I guess like walking up on a conversation, or like, I don't like to butt in, but I will butt in to start something, I mean like to trigger like an idea. I think it's important to, I guess, like relate to a different artist or someone else that's going to make them think that's really interesting. So I'm going to go like home and research it. But yeah, just went off the rails. Okay. Oh, you want to?
That's okay. That's okay. When you think of it, just
I'll
spit it
all
out.
the time.
I'll butt in.
I do it all the time too. Yeah. Well, when we work with people, our folks are really facilitators, and they're, depending on the group of people that they're working with, they might start with guidelines that the group together comes up with, and typically that's respecting, there's some basic ones: respecting one another, not interrupting one another, which I almost did with you, and I apologize.
I would let you.
Agreeing to disagree, just some basic sort of guidelines. And then having a facilitator, our teaching artists are facilitators. And so their role is to really hear the different perspectives in the room and sort of manage the conversation that takes place, because everything we do has some social aspect to it, which is really critical for the older populations that we work with, because they're often isolated. And so really being able to steer the conversation if someone becomes too dominant, or if somebody gets aggressive, or if language is used that is offensive, being able to say, I appreciate that you have that perspective. Are you aware how offensive that can be to others? And being able to have that open dialogue and tell someone, I find that term offensive and this is why. And just really trying to ensure that people in the room are respectful of one another. And if someone is disrespectful, we don't hesitate to ask them to leave. And I mean, I hate to do it. I would rather include everyone. But if someone can't follow the guidelines, then it's disruptive for everyone else in the room, and we're not going to get anywhere. And I can only think of one situation where I had to do that in the 10 plus years that I've done this. Did it come back?
Did it come back? I don't know.
She has a question. We have a question.
Oh, I was just going to chime in on that. And basically, you're describing sort of being mediators and allowing other people, like your inclusivity.
That word, yes.
Did we practice our words, Janie? Did we practice our words?
Multiculturalism. It's knowing when it's your place to speak and knowing when it's not your place to speak, and step down and provide that platform for a voice that needs it over you. And I think that, like, as mass public or like general community, that's really important. And a question stemming from that is, do you guys feel like you have that platform to speak out and like represent yourself and the minorities that you do represent? Do you feel like Greensboro is like doing a proper job with that? Do you think that there is space for improvement? What do you wish you were seeing more of? Is that okay?
Yeah, awesome.
I think Greensboro is doing a great effort in doing the right thing.
A good effort, but maybe not quite.
And like, what are those efforts?
Well,
I'm not sure
and I'm talking about just Casa Azul, so in general, with my experience with them, and one example is just get the office here. It took the organization like
Years.
well, yes, of trying to have space, which is supposed to be for art organizations that represent the different cultures present. And I said the only one that is not present is Latino art. I mean, here we have the organization. So, but they tried, they looked, and we finally got it in, and we have had the support of it. But at the same time, I think the structures of powers in Greensboro are exactly the same as they were 100 years ago. And you will see the same names in every single foundation and the same name in every single board. And when we talk about inclusivity, that can be a problem. And that also goes down to funding and to resources. And with art, I think it can be a little tricky because there's also the distinction, and that in every culture, about popular art and high art. So how do we define art? So when they want to have an exhibit of high art, you get the same group, and then, oh, let's have Native American art, let's have Latino art, let's have African American art.
Yeah.
And I've had that, oh, that doesn't look very Latino. Well, it's an artist. You know, I mean, I can bring you the same Mexican with the cactus and the sombrero, but I mean, there are other artists. So I think that, but I think that is, to be honest with you, my experience in Greensboro has been education. So very Southern, they don't mean that way, but you have to educate. And then when I stop getting mad at it, and when I start breathing, and then I realize, okay, so I have to sit and I have to have another meeting and explain. And then the doors opened. So we're the newcomers. I mean, actually, I moved here 20-some years ago to Greensboro, and I remember driving through downtown because as a Latina I would go through downtown because that's where things happen. And I had a really good friend of mine who was American, and I remember driving in a Saturday night, and she said, "Give it up, Claudia, there's nothing here." And it has changed enormously, and I think that people have changed it. So it is a long way. But is it inclusive 100%? No. There's still some issues with, oh, this is African American art, this is Latino art, this is it, but they recognize the present. So I think it will get there because I really think that the thought of doing it is there. It's just that
They might not know how.
they don't know how, and they've been in power forever, and they're the same names in there. I mean, and we talk about structural powers. It's not just Greensboro. It's wherever you go. It's the
whole
same.
country.
Yeah. So that's my 5 cents in there.
The staleness of those in power. But continue, I'm so sorry.
I agree.
I think that's a good point because people want to leave art up to interpretation, and because that's like all they know. Like people coming in that are, I'm not going to say that don't know art, but people coming in, they're like, oh, I see this painting and it has like a white circle. Wonder what that means. But sometimes like people think that everything's up to interpretation, but sometimes things mean things. Like, I mean, Latino art doesn't have to be a cactus. Doesn't have to be a picture of a Native American in regalia. But it can be.
It can be.
It can be, and if it is, there's a meaning, probably. We didn't just slap it there for no reason. But for multiculturalism and like keeping it, I guess, like going in Greensboro, and like if it's doing its job, I don't know. Because, I mean, to me, like the Native American, like getting people together and knowing who is Native in Greensboro is very hard because you don't know. There's like a couple Facebook groups that are like on Tuesdays at 6:30, we're going to do drum circle. And then they'll be like, rain, we're not doing it. I mean, and then what do you do between now and the next week? You don't connect. So, and then over in the gallery beside here, in the Guilford Natives thing, and how you have Native Americans that just, they put their art in, and I never see that, like, I never see a flyer, I never see anything like that, like, how did it get there?
Promotion.
Yeah, promotion, like, how did it get there? Why, I mean, who heard about it? I didn't hear about it. And I don't know if it's word of mouth, and I'm just like, I don't know a lot of natives here, but also I think it's hard with tribes because people are like, I'm more native, I have blood quantum. And it's hard with like lumpies because we don't have that. We accept you for who you are. I mean, lumpies can have freckles, they can have red hair, they can, and it's just all a part of different tribes and like being like in between like the Scottish and all this stuff that happened back then. And so when you get people that either are in a like a powwow or like having their art out, they're like, so who is this? This is so and so. What tribe are they from? Lumpy. They're not that native, so they just kind of like exile them out of, like, I guess they're not going to include them into some things. I don't know. Not saying that's happened to me, but I mean, I just don't think that there's enough promotion with certain things. I'm not just saying from like my point, but I think like I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any promotion with that. I mean, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. So I just think that there needs to be more of an effort put in. And I'm really happy that you guys are putting this on because I mean not just 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or like when I just got here, I never knew this was here. The only reason I knew this building was here is because of my cousin. And he was amazing and he helped me get my scholarship for college. And I never knew like we could even get any kind of federal help. And it was government. So, because we're not recognized by federal government. I mean, anyway, I never knew this was here, and I have come on different occasions and seen flyers and things, and that's where I know when things are happening. Because people come here because it's a big building. They're like, I will put things there, people will see it, but they don't always see it. Not a lot of people are coming.
But I think that the resources, and that's where funding is so critical, and I think that if we talk about inclusivity or we talk about the opportunities, I don't think that underrepresented groups, and that by that talk about Asian and Native American and Latino and African American, have the same support system than other art organizations have. And that also goes with the high art or low popular art, that definition of what is art. Well, we can argue that for a long time and never come to a conclusion on that. But to answer, I think Greensboro, I'm very positive about it. I think Greensboro is trying really hard. For me, there are two places that really have made a difference in this city, and one, and the building is coming alive, and I think that this is the first year that I've seen collaborations and conversations, and I think that we, Devon, myself, you, we're always trying to reach out, and it's like, oh God, there's a minute I can go around. So we hire somebody for Casa Azul because it's all board run, so we all work full time, and we run the organization. So I told her, I said, you need to do your round around the building and go and talk to people, because that's the only way you're going to make the connections. If you don't go and once a week and still say, hi, Damon, what's going on? Then you won't know what's going on. So I think that but it's an effort that we have to make. And I forgot where I was going to go, so when I remember.
I think everybody gets so busy. I mean, I know I'm like so busy with so many different things, and so it does make it hard to try to maintain the collaborations, but everything we do is in collaboration with some other organization. So when we first moved in the building, and I don't remember how long ago it was, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I was going to everybody all the time, trying to create collaborations. And even within this building, I still don't know what's going on, you know. And we have occasional meetings of the tenants, but a lot of people don't show up. Yeah, so I mean, and people, the folks who run the cultural center are aware that that's an issue, and with the whole G Camp, are y'all familiar with the G Camp?
Did you get dropped off?
Creative Greensboro? No, it's not actually a camp.
No, I mean, like, I'm talking about how they have that thing. They have that art
Everybody
for
thinks
the
it's a camp.
No, there is a little camp here.
There
This
is.
building.
Well, they do a camp, and Green Hill Art Quest does a camp for kids, but it's the Creative Greensboro, blah, 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 blah. What does it stand for?
It's the master.
Master
Oh,
plan.
yes.
That thing.
Yes. I
Yeah, the
went to
master
so many
plan.
meetings,
Yeah, so there have been a lot of meetings
a lot of meetings.
for that, but they call it G Camp, which I think is very confusing because it sounds like a camp for like kids.
The city is basically organizing, they hired consultants, outside
Yeah.
consultants to come in and basically question the entire city, organizations, and then also the community, the public, to figure out like what we need and what we want, and basically like how we want to spend money for the arts, which is a super generic, like, general question. And they question, like arts organizations and artists in this space for a few weeks, but so few people knew about it.
Did they do a forum or anything? Like, how
There was an online
There was
survey.
an online survey, and we came to several meetings.
Well, you can contact Nancy Hoffman.
Yeah.
She is running it, and so she's one of your council members.
Wouldn't this be more helpful if locals did it, if they like delegated
Well,
this
and
job
that,
to
and that
locals?
brings me to the mural
Yeah.
situation. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the mural, and that's what I'm saying, they're trying. So, and I think that the inclusivity and the multiculturalism, they're really trying to create a appealing city. And for that, but it's also with business purposes. I
Yeah,
mean, arts-
economic development,
Economic development,
basically.
that's what it goes behind. And like we have the murals, and they're beautiful, some beautiful murals, many of them painted from people not from Greensboro, not local. And if you read about it, it's all about building bridges and creating a beautiful city. Well, the muralist movement, when it really started big, was in Mexico, and it was a political response to a situation.
Yeah.
And it was a way to educate people, and it was political, it was historical. And so.
And
it
now
could
it's a
have-
pretty thing in
and there are
Greensboro.
pretty things
Yeah.
in Greensboro. And if you
Yeah.
go to Los Angeles, and if you go to Charlotte, and if you go to any city, murals, we have that dialogue, conversation in a more political way. And I think that that's the part that as a Latin American, I'm not speaking for Casa Azul, I'm speaking as a professor, and I'm speaking as a person, it bothers me the lack of
Support of local.
Yes, lack of
artists.
support of local artists and problematization of the issues. It's
Yeah.
just, let's do it.
They just want to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they want a
Not
big
properly.
name, I think,
Well, I think
too.
that they want to do it properly, but
I think they want something pretty to decorate buildings because they think it's cool and then
Yeah.
it'll bring people here, and then it's like, you know how the brewery scene is like,
Yeah.
hitting off this like the same like hip culture, and they're not seeing what is more common in most
yeah.
cities.
And,
where-
and the city is a beautiful city, but we are having problems of hunger,
Mhm.
of poverty.
Housing.
We are having
Housing.
problems with us aging. We're having people of homelessness, drugs. Where are those in the murals?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why does it always have to be pretty?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just superficial, like, just, if it looks good.
So
Yeah.
let's come.
Bringing somebody from outside too avoids the difficult challenge of choosing something local. And I think that goes back to what y'all have said about those difficult conversations and how do you choose what's good and bad and who has the say-so to do that.
Right.
And it's a really limited group of
The
people.
decision makers are.
Yes, how to
Up
have those
here.
difficult conversations. It's very important.
I think that's a huge thing with the collaboration thing, but also racially. Whoops, sorry. We're minorities, so we're not always going to have the say-so So there's always going to be a higher person above us that's going to make those calls. Talking about the murals, there are 2 murals around town. I don't know exactly where they are, of 2 Native American in my tribe. I know their names. I don't know anything about them. And they put them in the news record and put their names under the mural. Who are they? They're not saying who they are. Who wrote it? I don't know. But I think it's a problem with, we need to, as us guys, not us, but someone that's driven to, like a minority that's driven to go to the top and take the reins and say, this is it, like I am higher than so-and-so, and I'm gonna make these people known. I'm gonna, do research and all this other thing. I'm gonna give out the information. We're gonna make this a thing. We're gonna educate. Yeah, they're gonna ask questions. So just throwing up people's faces on walls and not saying who they are is it's not helping anyone. Like, oh wow, this is a beautiful picture. There's a guy in a headdress,
Yeah.
and there's a beautiful woman with braids. So pretty.
I was writing a grant report the other day, and actually the grant was all about advocacy for Latino arts and cultures. And I was just tired of being kind of invisible, and we didn't have them. And if you're not, and it's because of my organization, we all work, we are board members, didn't have a staff. So if you don't go to the tenants meeting, if you don't go to the meetings of the arts and cultures, if you don't go because you're working, and nonprofits are wonderful at having all of the meetings at lunchtime when they can go, or at 10 o'clock, and so you're in existence. So it's not like they're not considering, but you're not present in the conversation. So we wrote a grant to hire somebody to be present in the conversation and to start creating partnerships. And believe me, I'm tired of talking to people, but it has created the results. And my report, I remember writing saying, I realize, lesson learned, is not that they don't want to participate or they don't want to include us, it's that they don't know. And I realized that it's a lot of education. I mean, there was going to be, and I'm not going to mention the place, an art exhibit of Latino art, and they called us to see if we could organize a party maybe with taco trucks and things. And so that's where my professorial came out, and I gave a lecture on the part. And we had a wonderful collaboration. And there was no intention to offend, and there was no intention to ignore. There was pure not knowing what the other had to offer. But that requires an effort on our part, because you're still talking to the power.
Right.
And that's when the frustration comes. But I think, to be honest with you, with my years here, I think that they're trying, they just need to work. And I don't know if you had the same experience as an African-American artist, or if...
I have, not in the artist realm, but I think, like, I agree with what you guys are saying about, I agree with what you're saying. I think the other thing that I'm thinking about is, like, you know, people just don't know. Kind of like what, like, people think that they're doing the right thing. Like, some people know exactly what they're doing and they know it's not the right thing. But then you have some people who really, they just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So I've had my own experiences. I serve on a board here. One of the boards is good. The other one, it's like, it's just, you know, it's very, I'm the youngest person on the board. I'm also pretty much the only minority on the board. And everybody that's on this board, they are very powerful people in Greensboro. So it's always like a really interesting discussion with them, but there's been a lot of times where, like, it's hard, but I have to kind of like shake it up a little bit and be like, this is not the right way to go. Like, you cannot make these decisions when you don't know what this is like. Hopefully I'm making sense here without calling people out.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I have some people who really, like, they have really good intentions, and they just don't know. Like, maybe the experiences they've had with people are just very sheltered, and so they make assumptions, and I'm like, it's not the same for everybody. So I think trying to educate people and giving them the benefit of the doubt that they are trying, and if you try to educate them and they're still just not getting that, maybe that's a different situation. But I've found most of the time, if I just try not to get upset about it, or if I am upset, be upset, but then come back level-headed and just give them information, so much more comes out of that than being combative or defensive. So
Yeah, but
Yeah.
going back to that, I think I think that's a good way to say it, because when people are genuinely ignorant of, I guess, certain cultures or that, whatever you're talking about, it doesn't have to be culture, it could be political. You want to say something and you want to jump in and you want to say, no, don't do it that way, do it this way. But that's going to get you in an argument. So coming in level-headed is hard to wait. It's hard. You want to do it right then and there, but you're so angry because you're you're so stupid. Why are you doing that? But then you have to come back and you're like, no, they don't know, whatever. So
sometimes it helps to be angry.
Yeah, and it's
Sometimes to have that passion,
but
it
when
helps.
But when people aren't angry, okay, when people know it's not right, they just know it's not right, and they know a lot about it, and they're not angry. If you're not upset by the problem, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
You're not stepping in, you're not educating anybody about it. There's your chance.
Yeah.
You could do it, but then now these people are still ignorant, and I don't think anybody might be as smart as you to tell them. Not patting yourself on the back, maybe you know more than someone that's already, take social media and how people just post whatever they want, which is their right because it's their whatever. And you know exactly you know that it's not right. And it's not an opinion. It's a fact. And they are taking this fact and they are twisting it into a pretzel of shit. And you could just jump in there and be like, hey, or send them a message and not make it a long thing where people get defensive and they're like, you're attacking me in front of people. But I think it's important to tell people tactfully, even though I don't like doing that. So sometimes I'm part of the problem because I don't want to do that, and I know that if I come at them strong, I'm not going to get anywhere.
I think it's real important to always look at those teaching moments and just recognizing that, yes, there are people who are stupid. I'm sorry, and I don't mean, well, let's not get into that. Sorry. But there are people who, like you say, they don't know what they don't know. And if you just approach it from the standpoint of, I have an opportunity now to educate someone about this particular situation. And I've had to do that because the auto response is anger when, certain things come up, or there's so many different issues that happen around older adults or around refugees, and that topic and things that people say, and really just calling them out, but in a way with compassion, that you may not be aware, and I want to let you know that this is how that makes me feel, and I'm sure this is how there are other people that feel this way. And opening that dialogue in a compassionate way, that I'm not blaming you, I'm not accusing you, I'm not threatening you, I want to. I really want to have the dialogue and provide that opportunity to make you aware of how what you're saying or doing is offensive.
And teaching moments and learning moments, because I have had to learn so much about the Southern culture and about Greensboro and about where I live or where I have lived for the past 20 years. to be able to understand why certain people are the same way. And we make assumptions as well sometimes, and it's and some of my closest friends are people that I would have never thought I was going to be friends with. And some have completely different political ideas and every other ideas. But so I've learned as well as I have taught. And I think that that is, when you talked about inclusivity, that dialogue, that communication is critical. Because the same way we are coming from one point, the dominant culture, and that's how it is, because there is a dominant culture, is also coming from a different point. And some of them feel threatened and they don't want to change, but others really want to be inclusive, but they just don't know how. And so I think is room for maneuver is we have to use the system to maneuver to get where we want, and sometimes that will get us much faster than just
bulldozing through.
You had.
It's kind of interesting to see that you're all women up there.
That was my point. I was going to say, don't forget that. Look at we're all women, and it makes a difference.
That some of the words that are constantly in play are things that are stereotypically female traits, like compassion and collaboration and all these things. I personally feel like women, not that it's only women who can do these things.
Right.
Yeah.
What are women in some way uniquely capable of raising these issues? Is there a reason women are driving a lot of these
I
initiatives?
think it's mostly our interest in the area. I don't know, but it's interesting. And sometimes this is funny because actually in our board we have majority of women, and we've been sometimes questioning grants because we don't have the diverse men, and so we're like asking, shall we get the token man in here? And we said, can you be part of the board just to say
be the
that we
man?
have one more man in the group, even if you're not going to do any work? I think that more than the compassion, the thing is, and I don't want to stereotype, but I think we get things done.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes, and if you have the kid to bring along, you bring the kid along and you put him to play there, and then you continue doing, because we can multitask much better than men, and most women can do it because we do it all the time. So I don't know if it is the compassion, because men, with my husband we always laugh, and he's the woman of the family because he'll cry, he will be the sensitive. I don't have time for that. I just need to get it done, and sorry to bother you, sorry to hurt your feelings with it, but I can multitask much better than he can. So I can have a full-time job, and I can be volunteer in organizations, and I can be in the board, and I can write a grant, and I get exhausted at the end, and then I'll get up the next day and I'll continue
Do it all
doing
over
it.
again.
I think it's interesting that you guys have all kind of spoken on like inclusivity in the community, whereas like I'm sure that you're hitting obstacles when you're looking at where funding is being designated and applying for grants and all this stuff, because who you're appealing to a lot of times are like old white dudes that aren't going to change what they think. And like my perspective is like, yeah, you guys can educate them and you can look for teaching moments, but like, is that your responsibility? Should it not be also their responsibility?
And I think
to reach
that's
out?
we take the multicultural term and definition in a political way, because multiculturalism is also talking about equal opportunities and equal respect to all of the different, and that's still not. We might have intention, but we don't have equal respect in the arts.
No.
We don't have equal opportunities, and we don't have equal sharing of the fundings, and that is as it is. And it's funny.
Well, I wonder, I keep thinking about, you're talking about people just don't know. So like they don't realize that they're overlooking entire populations of people. And so someone has to let them know that you can't just wait for them to
Figure it out.
on their own. Because they don't
They don't
always
know.
ask that question. So I'm thinking like, and maybe Marissa, you can speak on this, like as far as promotion, because in each of these panels we hit on, well, the first couple, we hit on the idea of the lack of promotion, the lack of knowledge in general about like all kinds of things, like even just organizations not knowing what each other are doing, artists not knowing that each other exists. For this show, we had a lot of complication. People thought they weren't allowed in, even though we said open to all. They still were like, are you sure? Like, can I do this? Can I do this? And so I kept having to say specific things like performance, build a garden, have a play, like anything, like all means anything. So I think even like the most open minds are still insecure in some way about what that might mean generally. So I wonder if promotionally and brand-wise, social media-wise, shall we can find ways to start articulating exactly what is needed or what is or what we are or want to see
or even if you are doing that, how do you reach a new audience that isn't already getting that material on their feed?
I feel like we are failing. Like I'm struggling to find ways to just feel like I have to be articulate in every single way possible, which I'm willing to do.
You are.
But people just aren't. They expect a certain generality. Like art is painting on a wall. You know, can we please get something that's on the floor?
And Latino art is some craft that they do with children.
Yeah.
Right. So do we need to start articulating like we are having a show that incorporates this and this and this and like specifically say like do we need to change our branding?
I think it's like, I don't know, it's like you win and you don't win. When you like say like this is open to Latinos and Latinas and African Americans and Middle East, like when you say that, it's like, okay, well you're kind of segregating people. But then it's almost like you kind of have to do it to some degree until we get to a better place. So I think it's like, it's hard. I feel like this is a conversation I have with people often because like, sometimes I'm like weird about spaces that are just for African Americans or just, because everything I do, I really try to just like invite everybody. Like, oh, you're Christian? Oh, you're Muslim? Oh, and like, that's how my whole life is. It's just a bunch of people that are just all so different.
I should have said yeah, sorry.
But no, you're good. I think basically, I feel like it comes back to education and then also just like, yeah, maybe like calling it out to people so there's no
How do you have a crossover where you're like, I'm calling out, this is a show for minorities without once again separating them from like, just a show that they should already be included in and just as valid?
I don't personally know the answer to that,
Well,
but I feel,
but
I didn't want to speak for everybody, but I think it's until, like, I feel like we're making progress. Like, even though there's so far to go, whether it's in Greensboro, just as a nation, as a whole, like, we're making progress. And it seems like maybe a crossover could come, like, a little bit later down the line, but to me, it seems like for now, until people realize that all means them too, that you have to say, yeah, you as what you are, you're allowed to come. And then once people feel kind of like welcome and invited, then maybe you can kind of like trail it off.
Way, like step down and spotlight them whenever you have the means of providing a platform.
And maybe explanation, you know, like when we collaborate, our organizations, we don't just put our names on pamphlets and stuff, but we say we're collaborating because of these reasons.
Right.
Because of the lack of these things. These people need these things.
Yeah.
Give it to them.
Yeah.
Which is like we started, and we put the words there because
And I think that also when we talk about, because that's something we struggle to, okay, we want to have an art exhibit for Latino artists, but then you say, well, are we excluding? But I think that when you talk about underrepresented groups, you are talking, it's kind of affirmative action. We've been invisible for so long. So if you want to make yourself visible, or your artist, or your group, or whatever, you really need to at least begin with that way, and then start like saying, representations of Latin America or Latino art in our community. That will open it up more. But if you start with that, and nobody questions, for example, Green Hill has an exhibit, the Winter Show, which is for North Carolina artists. So in a way, they are already doing it, but they open for others. So I think that, there are Latino artists that live in North Carolina, Native American, etc. But so it is inclusive, but exclusive in a way. And I think that at least now, I wouldn't feel bad about having an art exhibit just of Latino artists, because I feel like we need to have that presence before we can move on and say, okay, here we are. And that's as a Casa Azul organization, which that's our mission and vision.
Yeah. You shouldn't feel bad about that.
So,
But there's an artist in the 60s, he's still alive, Raymond Saunders, he's from the Bay Area, and he was a mentor of my mentor, and he kind of coined this term, black as a color, because he kept getting stereotyped as the black artist, and he would only be shown if he was included in shows that were only about black artists. And so he kind of tried to rebel, like, why can't I just be like an artist?
Just an artist.
Yeah.
Like,
Just an artist.
abstract,
Yep.
why can't I be an abstract artist? So there's that push and pull. Like,
but I think that you can do that. I mean, we could have an exhibit, and there used to be one in Winston that we want to take over because they disappeared because of lack of funding, and it was on Latin American artists of North Carolina, of the area. And you saw abstract art, and people say, oh, this is not very Latino. Well, it's art. And we cannot forget that art, it is an economic driver, and it's a business.
Yeah.
It is a business, and I think that that's where the city kind of
Well,
make it too central being the business.
it
you
could
know?
be so much bigger.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much more the city could do. But I want to go back to your question about, is it our job to educate the funders? And with creative aging being a new field, my first 3 years of running the organization was sitting down with funders and explaining what it is, because I had healthcare funders saying you're doing arts, and I had arts funders saying you're doing healthcare, and I kept having to explain it's a crossover. And then, so it took a long time, and I still have to have the conversation on a regular basis that the one thing we all have in common is we're all going to get old, unless unfortunately we die young. But for the most part, that's the thing that we all, regardless of race, socioeconomics, anything, we're all going to get old. And we all know others who are getting older. And
And that's not a problem.
and it's not a problem, it's a resource. And yes, there may be problems, and there may be people who have terrible diseases like dementia, but they can still be creative, and that can be a very valuable communication tool for someone who loses their ability to speak. So I think it's critical that when we're representing populations that are underserved, we educate as many people as possible. And that's part of, I think, our role in working with particular groups is educating as many people. That's why I'm sitting here right now, making sure, that people understand when we talk about inclusivity and diversity, that also means age. And I lost my train of thought.
But
We've all done it now.
I agree with you. We have to, I think it's part of our role to educate. If not, we're not going to.
Nothing will change.
Nothing will change.
Yeah.
Nothing will change. And that's when you're going to see who your allies are. And
Yeah.
who really are. I'm not going to waste my time going there anymore, but I really know where I can go and who is going to support me, because they
Well,
have
that's why-
proven it.
And I think that's why we reached out to all of you for this panel, because you do that in various ways, even though you might not think that you do, but you're doing that, and you've educated us. So then we were like, okay, let's
Sorry. So one of the questions, I know, and I'm proud of it, proud of every gray hair on my head. what the defining and the using of terms and how do we let people know what we're doing. One of the ways we do that is we say we are creative aging. If you define yourself as someone who is aging, you're welcome to participate. We're all aging, so we don't have a number. Now, granted, we focus in our initial work, we've focused on memory care and skilled care because that's where the fewest opportunities for older adults has been. They have not had those options unless they're in a really wealthy environment. But we have 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds that come participate, and I'm not going to put you in a box. I'm not going to define you a certain way. If you consider yourself aging and you're comfortable coming and being with people of various ages and cultures to make art, then come join us. You're welcome. Everyone's welcome.
And I think that's when you talk about inclusivity. We cannot put everybody on a box because we're so different, even within the culture, with the African American community, the Native American, the Asian, the Latinos. We're all different, even within our own communities. And if you put them in a box, then there's no way to go from there.
So I think we're getting a little late on time.
Any last questions?
Yeah, any last questions from the audience? Or not the audience, that's like puts a wall between us, I guess. The other people.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. This was fun. Thank you both for organizing this.
Yeah.
It's really great.
We thank you guys.
This was our last panel of this show. We are in Greensboro. It comes down Friday. We hope to continue this style of conversation and like community engagement. If you have ideas or suggestions, or like you want to hold conversations here, please reach out to us, come see us, and talk to us about it. We're really open, and we just want to keep pushing forward and connecting whatever we can. Yeah, and thank y'all for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I was in Chile.
Yes, ma'am, it does. I know. Have you gotten a chance to see it before?
I did.
Okay.
I like it. It's
Good. Yeah, it comes down Friday. Thank you.